Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, March 30th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, senior writer for Time Magazine, former member of the New York Times editorial board, Adam Cohen on Supreme Inequality, Supreme Court's 50-year battle for a more unjust America. Meanwhile, death and cases rise in New York. Trump extends the guidelines, and a Chinese airlift brings needed supplies to New York State. Back in Washington, phase 4 stimulus is being prepped, and Trump rejects oversight in stage 3. Meanwhile, Trump revises the idea of winning, calls it 100,000 deaths. And in wake of a shutdown in Seattle shows a decline in rates of infection. In New York, our primary has been bumped from April to June. Rikers Island has the highest infection rate in the world, as an explosion of cases hits a Louisiana federal prison. And at least a dozen students at Liberty University, that's Jerry Falwell's university, have coronavirus after returning back to campus. New poll out, Biden is consolidating his Democratic lead, but dropping against Trump. Meanwhile, Trump pulls the reservation status of the Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts to help his gambling buddies, and also suspends EPA enforcement and privatizes meat inspections. That was a busy Friday. Instacart deliverers on strike nationwide. New York Amazon warehouse workers plan 1 too. And lastly, little pat on the back for Sam. Trump insisting on signing all of those stimulus checks. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you joining us. We are in now, this constitutes week 3 of our remote broadcasting, as it were, webcasting, podcasting, casting. We're getting a little bit better at it. Still some distractions here or there, and I'm still working on the set here, but I upgraded a little bit of the lighting, and I didn't bother to shave or cut my hair. I don't know where I'm going to cut my hair. I also just want to say we've gotten so many nice emails, and it is really appreciated. It's nice to hear from folks, and it makes it just a little bit easier to do this under these circumstances when people write in and say, you know, I appreciate appreciate the chance to listen, and it makes things a little bit more normal to have you guys doing what you're doing. So Thank you very much for that. And obviously, thank you to Matt and Brendan, who are working remotely, and Jamie working remotely, and Michael, and everybody else who's coming on. It's and of course Kyle, who has been relentless in his upgrades for us, both things that you can see and things that you can't see in terms of the way that we are working. And we now are streaming our audio live. Kyle has the ability to just, I don't know, like you conceive of something that would make the what we're doing easier, and 3 hours later he's like, I did it. It's just sort of nuts in a way. But all right, let's get to our plugs and notices. We've got a lot to cover today, obviously, and just a little bit of insight into what we're thinking in terms of the way that we're trying to program the show. On one hand, I am reading about the horrors that are going on in New York City right now, particularly in the hospitals. I mean, obviously, everybody's staying at home. It's a very weird experience, I think, for folks where a lot of this you can't see except for occasionally video, or you see these stories on Twitter. There are pictures of refrigerator semis, essentially, that are functioning as temporary morgues. Tents up there. I have friends who are doctors, friends who are married to doctors, who are all on call, and they're sending back, messages. Mount Sinai looks like a war zone. These are different hospitals in New York. And then, of course, there are reports that this is start to see more, that it's spreading, to places like New Orleans and in, Albany, Georgia. But now it's starting to come across to other places. There's a real concern in Florida because, of course, the governor there sort of refused to acknowledge this was happening. Texas. And you hear these isolated stories of rural areas. Someone from a county upstate New York here sent me a link that had basically the Google spreadsheet that was tracking. And you can see these clusters in small towns where clearly the people didn't take it seriously. And there happened to be someone there who had it. Maybe they had traveled, maybe came, who knows? And these small towns do not have the capacity to deal with this. They simply don't have the infrastructure. And so we're at the start of something again that I think is going to be ongoing. And we'll talk a little bit more about masks in the plugs and notices. But with all that said, I got a little sidetracked. We're going to endeavor to keep doing the type of programming we've been doing for years. We may, as of late during the primary season, we were starting to do one or two more news days, one extra maybe a week. We're going to keep trying to do interviews, some of which will have to do with coronavirus, some of which will have to do with how we rebuild our economy after this. And then others that are, we will return to normalcy or some facsimile, and we will still have a lot of the issues that were present before, and in many respects, they'll be worse. So we're going to continue to bring on a range of guests. Sometimes it'll be a little bit off topic from the news of the day that is in everyone's forefront of their minds, and sometimes it won't. So that's what we're trying to do here. And a lot of books got pushed because of this, but we're still working on it, and we will see. Now it is time for our COVID-19 plugs and notices for March 30th, 2020. And here we go. First off, and I can't remember who told me to remind everybody, but the census. You have been mailed the census. Go online or mail it back, whichever you do, but fill out your census forms. Hugely, hugely important. Hugely important. This is going to be a real challenge this year. In addition to a Republican administration trying to make the census as incomplete as possible, this is just going to add to that. So make sure you fill out your census. Roger sends us links to 2 videos they made to make 2 kinds of face shields: heavy-duty face shields for medical personnel and disposable face shields. If you're going out, you don't have a mask. Face shield is a great way to shield your face. There's 2 different videos there. Tomorrow, I may actually even do a demonstration of how to make your own mask. There's a lot of data that shows that societies that have been pushing wearing masks have had much less of a problem, in part because we don't know asymptomatic transfer is big, and we don't know if we have it or not. So if you go out and wear a mask, when it becomes part of like societal norms during these times, it's much easier. You can make one easy with a t-shirt, just double layered up, but we will, I've seen a couple of examples of it. We'll find that out. Also, theprepared.com is a site which is sort of prepperish, but very reasonably so. In fact, I had read there about 2 months ago that toilet paper would be the first thing that runs out. And so they have a blog on how to disinfect packages from COVID-19. I can tell you that my practice is not as rigorous as theirs, but I leave the stuff outside for at least 24 hours. And then I go and I use work gloves. I take the stuff out. I dump it on the floor, throw the box, the edge of like the porch. And when I'm done, I turn the gloves inside out. I leave them outside for like 3 days, and I rotate gloves. And then I wash my hands. And then I do the same thing with the plastic on the inside if it has been shipped within the past 72 hours. But go there. We got a link on how you can disinfect those packages. Better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. We also have a link from Mike, who provides a volunteer on-demand messenger courier group. They're working on a website, but for now it's an Instagram page. That's COVID-19 messengers.com. Soria from Austin writes, Austin's Cow Potatoes Furniture has converted its furniture production line to manufacture personal protection equipment, masks, and gowns for the city, trying to keep stocks for individuals in the area in need. They're doing it for free. The materials they were using for pillows was certified to work. They're not making a penny off of this, but materials are running low. They're taking donations to fund restocking. And longtime listener M Happy Now is offering coaching services to MR listeners at half rate and by the minute for those who want 15 or 30 minutes due to money constraints. She also has a podcast, Happy Health, HAPPE Health, and we'll be updating it with tips and tools for those who can't afford anything now. If you let her know that you're an MR listener, she'll give the Sammy discount half rate at $1 per minute. Include the link to my most recent podcast, and you can check that out. Her information is below. It's mhappy.com, HAPPE.com. David writes, hi, everyone. I'm writing on behalf of Luna Video Games. I'm a customer of theirs. I'd like to share that they've been responsibly closed as soon as the stay-home order was issued. They sell retro-style video games, which are largely physical media and fill a space that helps keep a part of our recent history going. There's a site, lunavideogames.com. There are links for curbside service, merchandise, and a GoFundMe to help employees. Austin says, I create 3D computer models and print product samples. I do parametric and mesh modeling. Business is slowed now that my clients are closing. I can design and print anything. And I'm working on a 3D printer ventilator and would like help for resources to help prototype it and more to work on it. All files of V1 are online for free. I will post version 5 soon. It's printing now. That's at thingiverse.com. As always, all these links will be in the podcast description. Sam and crew, my brother works for a bar in Cincinnati named Urban Artifact. It's been shut down, but they ship their beer. They do small batch sours and fruited beers. The website is artifactmerch.com. I like those sours. Left is best. We also have another link in there for how to make your own mask from Hong Kong scientists. It's at scmp.com. We'll put the link in there. I believe you use like paper towels and rubber bands. Every little bit helps. Refoundry trains formerly incarcerated people to repurpose discarded materials into home furnishings and mentors them in their own business or career. You can check it out at refoundry.org. They could use some help. The Soup Kitchen in Milo writes, in Costa Mesa has been feeding the elderly, working the poor and homeless since 1986. SomeoneCaresKitchen.org. They're a federally registered charity. They're in desperately need of paper napkins, toilet paper, paper platers, small disposable cups, etc. Adam Ronquillo writes has some t-shirts at teespring.com. Stores Ronquillo Designs. Check that out. Freelancers Union has a guide on how to apply for COVID paid sick leave for affected freelancers. We will put a link to the freelancersunion.org on our site. There's also a GoFundMe for help hourly workers. And another guy, who is this? Oh, Nima, sorry. Nima has developed a platform for crowdsourced 3D printing of parts of COVID-19 little ships of Dunkirk. They have named it after Operation Dynamo. Our platform connects local hospitals to nearby volunteers with 3D printers. These volunteers will 3D print the necessary parts for respirators, et cetera, and send them to the hospitals. Anybody who has a 3D printer can join the website as a volunteer to list available jobs in their local area. You can go to Operation Dynamo, dynamo.org. And we'll put Nima's email on the description as well if you have any questions. And that is the plugs and notices for March 30th. If you have some, send us at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put into the link plugs and notices, and we will read it. Just trying to get stuff out there for people. In the meantime, you gotta wear some clothes. My daughter, she spent all her time trying to buy new clothes right now. And in the world of clothes shopping, as you know, there are no consistent sizes. Why should we try to guess if a medium is really a medium? Constantly have to return clothes purchased online to find something that fits perfectly. Well, Stitch Fix is a personal styling company that makes getting the clothes you love effortless. It's a completely different way to shop that's all about you every time. To get started, go to stitchfix.com/majority. Set up your profile, and they'll deliver great looks personalized just for you in your colors, in your styles, and your budget. You pay a $20 styling fee for each fix, which is credited towards anything you end up keeping. You can schedule at any time. There's no subscription required. Plus, shipping, returns, exchanges are easy and free. Stitch Fix does the hard work for you, making great styles and effortless for everybody, including men, women, and kids. For me, I got a couple of new pieces of clothing that I really loved, and a couple of brands that I had never heard of. First off, Brendan, as you recall, I got my Penguin Monty modern leather chuka. I mean, I don't know what I call them, like desert boots, but they got nicer soles. They're a little more stylish. when I want to feel like I'm going out for the evening, maybe I'm going to go to the kitchen and have a drink. I'll put on a nice pair of shoes. Also, what I've been loving and probably wearing too much is my thermal crew. It's from Aylesbury. I had never heard of them either. And I'm back on the thermal cruise up here because, I'm getting a little bit, I'm not going so much collared around the house. And I love it. The other thing, I got a mock neck sweater. Not into it. Not into it. Put it back in the bag, sent it back. It was easy peasy. That's the way this works, folks. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. Don't knock me. I'm not a mock crew guy. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. stitchfix.com/majority. All right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, Adam Cohen on supreme inequality. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Adam Cohen. He is a former member of the New York Times editorial board. He is a senior writer for Time Magazine and author of Supreme Inequality, Supreme Court's 50-year battle for a more unjust America. Welcome to the program, Adam.
Good to be here, Sam.
So let me just start off. I should tell you, because I think to a certain extent, your book is to dispel people of the myth of the progress that has been made by the Supreme Court across society. In some areas, yes. In other areas, no. That it is universal. I hope, if I've done my job correctly over the years, that skepticism already exists here amongst our audience. But so with that said, let's just start before we get to the last 50 years. Let's talk about the 15 or so years prior to that. Give us a sense of the Warren Court and where the Supreme Court was from 53 to, I guess, about 69.
Sure. So the Warren Court begins when Earl Warren, who was then the governor of California, is appointed Chief Justice. And that is this period of an activist court that many of us grew up in school learning about and associating with the Supreme Court, thinking that's how things always were. In 1954, within Warren's first year of arriving, the court hands down Brown versus Board of Education, and after that begins the slow but eventually fairly successful project of desegregating schools in the South. At the same time, they are transforming many other areas of the law. This is the period in which we got the Miranda decision, which said that police have to tell you that you have the right to remain silent before they question you. We got Gideon v. Wainwright, which promised every poor criminal defendant the right to a lawyer. We got a decision striking down the poll tax. We got decisions striking down forced prayer in public schools. So in many, many areas, the Warren Court was transforming society for the better.
When you say activist, I mean, what made the Warren Court activist?
Well, the Warren Court was not afraid to strike down laws or to issue orders to institutions when it saw unconstitutional things going on. So, for example, striking down laws that existed in the South, segregating not just the schools, but Jim Crow segregated every aspect of society. The Warren Court was willing to strike those laws down in a way that the court had not been before. But also, you look at a decision like Gideon v. Wainwright, guaranteeing every indigent defendant the right to a lawyer. That's a huge thing, right? That is imposing on every jurisdiction in the country an affirmative obligation to come up with lawyers for people. That was an expensive ruling for every city and county and state in the country. The Warren Court wasn't afraid to do that when they thought there was a constitutional right that had to be vindicated.
And let's just, there's really two different elements to activism in this context. One is a willingness to strike down laws and really, in some ways, act contrary to a legislative will based upon the Constitution. And then the other is to create mechanisms or requirements to protect constitutional rights, as in, like you said, in Gideon.
I think that's right. Exactly. And these were things that, the court had done from time to time. In the past, it had more often done that in a conservative direction. In the 1920s, the court was being activist to strike down progressive legislation, including laws against child labor. But here in the 60s, starting in the 50s, but mainly in the 60s, we had a liberal court that was actually willing to do this activism on behalf of the most disadvantaged members of society.
Okay, and so that before we head towards like the Nixon era and Abe Fortis, and I want to get there, but tell us about Shapiro v. Thompson, because in some ways this is like I don't know what those like in a parallel universe, this case has far more resonance, right, through the years.
What you saw also with the Warren Court, which was amazing, and Shapiro was an absolute example of it, was that the court was willing to go to bat for welfare recipients. This was, the poor were so often disparaged in Supreme Court rulings, and the idea of welfare was really, looked down upon. Suddenly in the 60s, you get a series of decisions, including Shapiro v. Thompson in 1969, where the court is aggressively saying, no, people have some kind of a right to welfare, and it shouldn't be taken away from them arbitrarily or denied them arbitrarily. In Shapiro, it was a matter of someone who had moved to a new state. They had moved to Connecticut, and Connecticut had a waiting a residency requirement that you had to be there for a year before you got welfare. And so poor people who moved there for their first year wouldn't get welfare. The Supreme Court struck that down. Now, there were those who had hoped that they would do it in even more expansive ways, come up with some kind of a broader right to welfare or something like that. The court didn't do that in Shapiro. It grounded its decision on the right to travel, but still, it was a very, very important decision that in practical terms delivered welfare to a lot of people who were being denied it.
And I guess my point is that's the type of case, because we're starting to see like analogs of this case in the Roberts court, where you start to slowly develop a line of cases that begins to expand or contract rights in some fashion. And that Shapiro case could have been theoretically the building blocks of expanding the state's obligation to its citizens.
That's right. And, one of the things I talk about in the book is that there was a really robust movement in the 60s of poverty lawyers there were many of them around the country, and they were very influential, who were, and academics. There were a lot of poverty law academics who were working with them, who were trying to establish much broader rights. So actually, in 1969, the same year that Shapiro v. Thompson was decided, Frank Michelman, who was then a young Harvard law professor, constitutional law professor, he's still a professor there now, wrote a very much discussed article in the Harvard Law Review, in the first article in the Supreme Court issue that year, arguing that there was actually perhaps a constitutional right to subsistence, to things like food and healthcare from the federal government. And that was the high watermark. But those arguments were being made. And some people hoped that Shapiro v. Thompson would be the case in which the court embraced that kind of broader idea about economic rights. Didn't do that. But as I say, it did still deliver a victory for poor people.
And it didn't do that. I mean, there's obviously, we could never know the counterfactual, but part of the reason why there was no chance of that happening was because of personnel changes on the Supreme Court. So let's move into now the era that you're writing about, or the beginning of it. And this is Nixon has the opportunity to fill 4 court seats. But talk about Abe Fortas, because I'm not sure that folks remember this little bit of history.
Sure. So Nixon is elected and is very eager to change the Warren Court, to end the liberal court and create a conservative one. And he's literally asking people about the health of the older liberal justices on a pretty regular basis, looking for any possible opening. And he's also fixated on trying to remove them in any way he can. Abe Fortas was a justice on the Supreme Court who had been put there by Lyndon Johnson. He and Lyndon Johnson were old friends, went way back. Abe Fortas had been his election lawyer and a close advisor. When Warren goes to Johnson in 1968 and says, I'm going to be retiring soon. The election was going on. Warren was afraid that Nixon would be elected and that Nixon would take over the court. Earl Warren says to Johnson, I'm going to step down. Please appoint a liberal successor. Johnson decides to elevate Abe Fortas from regular justice, associate justice to chief justice. The Senate rejects that. So Nixon comes in and he's not only getting to fill Earl Warren's very important seat of chief justice, but he sees that Abe Fortas has been weakened by his rejection from the Senate. And Nixon exploits that opportunity in a really, bloodthirsty and illegal, dirty tricks way. He begins threatening Fortas through his Justice Department with criminal prosecution, threatens Fortas's wife with criminal prosecution. Now, the thing is, Fortas had engaged in some ethical close calls, things that did not violate the law, did not violate any court rules. They didn't look very good. They provided an opening for Nixon. Fortas's wife had been investigated. She was a lawyer, a partner at the same law firm Fortas had been investigated for a matter involving a litigation that she was cleared of. But Nixon was able to use those openings. He sent John Mitchell, his attorney general, who was later himself imprisoned for Watergate crimes, goes to the Supreme Court and tries to bully Earl Warren. And anyway, all this threatening, this improper use of the Justice Department, because the Justice Department is, of course, not supposed to be used to threaten people with prosecution to change the ideology of the court. Nixon was using it as a political tool. It works. Abe Fortas steps down, and Nixon gets one of the 4, as you say, nominations he's able to get in just 3 years. And that proves critical to changing the court from a liberal Warren court to a conservative one. And in the book, I talk about several very important decisions that were 5-4 in the early 70s, that if Fortas had remained on the court, as he should have, liberals would have won, and we all would have had much more robust rights than we have today.
We should also say there, as far as I know, there's very little ethics rules that bind Supreme Court justices. I know that just because I've been following Clarence Thomas's career for the past couple of years, and conflicts of interest and whatnot. I mean, so it's an interesting. I mean, how much did what happened with Fortis inform the way that the Senate would approach appointees, nominees?
Well, the rejection of Fortis for Chief Justice was considered, that was a milestone, and I think it did pave the way in some ways for liberals to do things like reject Judge Bork down the road. So I think it presaged maybe in some ways a bolder role for the Senate, but I think that in my looking back on it, the real tragedy though of Fortis is all the lost opportunities that we had there to have a liberal court that lasted longer. And what's incredible is that Fortis's name is really never mentioned now. If you go to a law school, if you go to Yale Law School, where he was a graduate of, some say the most brilliant graduate of Yale Law School, he's just not talked about. He's considered an embarrassment, and it's an overreaction. He did some things. The main issue he got in trouble for was accepting money from a foundation that was run by a Wall Street financier, but it was a do-good foundation, and judges and justices actually did do consulting work at the time. It sounds a little strange now, although we do have judges and justices certainly who do a lot of speaking appearances, but there just wasn't that much that was that terrible. But the idea that Fortis is now considered a liberal embarrassment, he's very much a conservative embarrassment, because he's really the main exhibit in how the conservatives used skullduggery to take over the court in '69, much as they used it, half a century later with Merrick Garland to hold on to the liberal majority. So that's the Fortis message that I think people should know, but it's just not one that people are talking about at all.
Okay, let's move on to the cases that follow this right-wing takeover of the court. We've cases like San Antonio School District versus Rodriguez that we can talk about, and Milken v. Bradley, and a Bellotti case, and Dangerous v. Williams. Where do you want to start in terms of, in some ways we have sort of different tracks depending on what the issues are?
Right, and those first two you mentioned are absolutely critical. And I say that, not only because when I graduated from law school, I became a public interest lawyer for the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I worked on education cases. And me and my colleagues were working in the shadow of these cases, because those two rulings, Rodriguez in 1973 and Milliken in 1974, really closed the door to progressive reform in education coming from the Supreme Court. Rodriguez was a case in which poor Mexican-American students and parents in Texas sued Texas because there were such enormous funding disparities between rich and poor school districts. It made the education in the state very unequal. They made the very logical argument that if the government is going to provide education to children, the Equal Protection Clause says it has to do that equally, because the government is supposed to treat its citizens equally. They won at the federal district court level. 3-court judge unanimously ruled for them. It gets up to the Supreme Court, and in 1973, the court rejects their case 5-4. And that one of those 5 votes is the vote that would have been Abe Fortis's, but was instead a conservative who voted the other way. So that meant that all around the country, states were able to continue to unequally fund their districts, and that's very much true today, as I think we all know, that rich districts spend a lot more on their students than poor districts, and there's strong evidence that leads to different life outcomes for children from those districts. Then the next case.
I just want to stop there for a moment, because we spend a lot of time on this program talking about the implications of kids coming from poor districts, lower income areas, and how property taxes sort of perpetuate these disparities in the schools. And, there's a lot of stuff obviously that happens at home when you're talking about lower income kids. They don't have the same opportunities for educational experiences outside of the home. They don't have necessarily more nutritional challenges, but the way that we fund schools is so problematic. So in this instance, in terms of San Antonio School District versus Rodriguez, this would have been a situation where there would have been an obligation of San Antonio, or really ultimately of the federal government or states, right, to basically come up with a different scheme in providing funding for schools, right? That would have been like the baseline. They wouldn't have been able to say, you got to pull it away from real estate taxes, but they would have said that is, you got to if you want to come up with another way of funding, but funding would be the sort of like first order measure of providing equal schooling to people, right?
That's right. Every state under that would have been required to come up with a funding system that ensured equality. And as you say, made sure that it wasn't reliant on the higher ability of some districts to use property taxes than others. And, I actually think if the plaintiffs had won in that lawsuit and gotten equalized funding, over time, I think we would have evolved hopefully something bigger, which is the idea of ensuring equity in education, right? Because we actually know that if you spend the exact same money on a rich school as on a poor school, you're really still shortchanging the poor school, right? Because the poor school
Right.
is going to need, they need more social workers, and they need more bilingual teachers, and they have so many more needs. And that actually what we should have is an idea of equity where every school gets funded, properly, so that in effect, the level of education they're able to provide is equal. And that would mean spending more money on poor districts. So we could have moved in that direction. It would have been an obligation on all 50 states. And it's tragic that it came within one vote of winning.
Yeah, it's stunning. All right, so then let's move on to was it Milken v. Bradley that you wanted to talk next?
Yeah, a critically important case. So the next year, 1974, the NAACP brought a lawsuit in Detroit on behalf of Black school children in Detroit, trying to vindicate their right to an integrated education, which was being vindicated across the South in the wake of Brown v. Board of Education. And ironically, by the late 60s, we found that the schools in the South were becoming more racially integrated than the ones in the North, in places like Detroit, where we saw so much white flight that effectively whites were being educated in the suburbs and blacks were being educated in the cities. So this lawsuit said that these Black students in Detroit were just as entitled to an integrated education as the kids who were getting it in the South. And the only way to do that in a city like Detroit was to come up with a metropolitan area remedy. So it was to say that we're going to or somehow move kids around the whole metropolitan area and not respect the district lines, because the school district lines became racial lines. They win that case in the district court in Detroit, and the federal judge there comes up with a really great remedy, which is to create essentially pie slice shaped school districts. So every school district has part of the city of Detroit in it and part of the suburbs as well. And what this created was a lot of school districts in the metropolitan area that all precisely reflected the racial composition of the whole metropolitan area, which was between 70 and 80% white, the rest largely Black. So this meant that everyone would be going to a largely white school district, but everyone in metropolitan Detroit would be getting an integrated education. That ruling was by the Federal Court of Appeals, the next step, and then it gets up to the Supreme Court. And again, 5-4, they say, nope, there's no obligation to have any remedy across the district line. So if Blacks are trapped in Detroit and we're unable to give them an integrated education because there aren't enough whites in Detroit, too bad. So the combination of these two rulings really ensured we would not have equality of education in this country, because one said you don't have a right to equal funding for your district, and the other said if you're in a big city where so many minority students were, you have no right to an integrated education. And again, if Abe Fortis had been there, it would have been 5-4 the other way.
So those are the key education rulings that have obviously implications through the decades that followed and continue on today. And I think in many respects also made our education system so susceptible to the corporate reform movement that we have more or less just sort of passed through and which also did a tremendous amount of damage to our education system. And the other sort of, I guess, I don't know, twin horse of the apocalypse of inequality, as you outline it, is has to do with our campaign finance system, and really what that ultimately means is the failure of politicians to be responsive to the issue sets and the needs of ordinary people as opposed to moneyed interests.
That's exactly right. And, I talk in the book about how there was a world inequality report that came out in 2018 by Thomas Piketty and other economists. And they said there were two main drivers of inequality in the United States. One was educational inequality, which we just talked about. The other, they said, was the lack of progressive taxation, which, the top tax rates have gone down so much in recent decades. And that really is, both of these are attributable to the Supreme Court. And the reason our terrible, unfair tax system is attributable to the Supreme Court is just what you said. It's that starting in 1976, the Supreme Court just began striking down campaign finance law after campaign finance law. And as a result, the Supreme Court ensures that wealthy individuals and later corporations really have undue influence on Congress and the legislatures. And it really did start in 1976 when the same, conservative court decides that money equals speech. And they struck down, after Watergate, Congress actually passed a very strong campaign finance law that really would have changed the role of money in our society. And the Supreme Court strikes down half of it. It strikes down the limits on expenditures and says, you have a First Amendment right, rich person, to spend as much money as you want to get someone elected. And that's really been the undoing of our democracy.
Let's talk about some of the those cases and the sort of I guess like you say, Buckley v. Vallejo is the most important one. Just give us a sense of what was involved there, and then I guess we could talk about obviously that goes through a series of other cases till we get to Citizens United. But Buckley v. Vallejo is the original sin in that regard.
That's exactly right. And so as I said, after Watergate, there was just tremendous popular pressure on Congress to pass campaign finance reform, because people forget now, but the Watergate scandal, in addition to being about breaking into the Watergate Hotel, there were major campaign finance improprieties uncovered of large corporations, delivering money to the committee to reelect the president in paper bags and things like that. So Congress does pass this very strong reform. It gets challenged by James Buckley, then the New York conservative senator, and some other people. The D.C. Circuit, which is the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., which hears the case first, actually upholds the entire law and quite reasonably says this really isn't about speech. That giving money to a campaign isn't really speech. And it also has very strong language about how this is very, very important for Congress to act to protect our elections. So that was a great ruling from the D.C. Circuit. It goes up to the Supreme Court and they reverse. And as I said, they created this framework that, is still with us, where they said, okay, well, if you're giving money to a campaign, that could lead to some, fear of corruption. So we're going to allow regulation of that. But if you're just spending money on your own to elect a candidate, there's no worry about corruption. And they struck that down. And that basic framework has remained with us over the years, but it's allowed so many loopholes because, as we know, there's now a tremendous amount of spending from PACs and super PACs and rich people on their own to get candidates elected that doesn't need to be a direct contribution to the campaign. And yes, there have been cases over the years that have expanded these, that have struck down, reasonable attempts to come up with other ways to limit the role of money in campaigns. And ultimately, it did lead to Citizens United, which, people know was taking this a whole step further. The idea that corporations have the right to use their own treasury money and the amounts of money corporations have, of course, are enormous and really so much larger than individuals have, to use that to elect candidates. This idea that they have some right to speak. A corporation isn't really the sort of entity we think of as speaking. We've always thought of people as speaking. But anyway, that created such an enormous new loophole that the floodgates have been opened ever since. And none of this had to happen. This is all the Supreme Court really denaturing our democracy.
There's a whole host of cases that follow there. Boston Bank versus Bilotti in Massachusetts and others. But I want to talk a little bit about a couple of other cases that in areas which you write also contribute to the inequality that we have. Limits on class action suits. Let's talk about that a little bit. That is one of my bailiwicks, as it were. But just talk a little bit about how that lends itself to inequality in the
Sure.
wealth inequality, income inequality.
Sure. Access to the courts has many aspects to it. And, one is literally being able to file a complaint. But you also have to be able to, bring a lawsuit that gives you some reasonable chance of proceeding and winning. So for poor people, for working class people, it is so expensive to litigate and to hire a lawyer and certainly to go up against a major corporation. Essentially, you almost can't do it unless you have a class action. There's certainly some exceptions. But so when women who had, very strong factual basis for saying they were being discriminated against by Walmart wanted to sue, they really had to do it as a class action. An individual woman who says that, she was repeatedly turned down for management when, newly arriving men were, put into management right away. She's not going to be able to hire a lawyer and sue Walmart and get anywhere. She just doesn't have the resources. So those need to be class actions. And that case actually existed. Many, many women who worked for Walmart did get together and brought a class action charging Walmart systematically discriminated against women. They proceeded as a class. And when it got to the Supreme Court really issued a terrible ruling on class actions and said that that the women had failed to show that there was enough commonality to their claims, that even though they were all claiming sex discrimination of very similar kinds, it was hard to be promoted, they were being underpaid, and on, that because they didn't show that they were all affected by, say, the same manager or something very specific, they couldn't be a class. So, the court the court issued that ruling in terms of what does commonality mean in the class, and there's a lot of sort of legal niceties about that. But essentially, they were closing the door on large class actions. And as I say, when you do that, you really give large corporations like Walmart a free pass, because unless workers can band together in pretty large groups to sue, they're not going to sue.
So is there a way, can Congress fix that? When the Supreme Court makes that ruling that there's not enough commonality, right? That everyone's harm has to be the same, or that the way that the harm was inflicted must be exactly the same, as opposed to the Walmart just sort of turned a blind eye to managers who were paying women less, or was consciously paying women less, but in some instances it was 20% less. In some instances it was 15% less, or whatever it is. But can Congress step in, or is that what in that case, Dukes v. Walmart, is that a specific? Is there something in the Constitution that they found? I mean, what is the basis for that ruling?
Yeah, no, it was a federal rule of civil procedure that governs class actions. Yes, Congress could step in, and Congress has stepped in response to some of the other cases we might talk about. Other worker cases, like notably the Lilly Ledbetter case, right, where the Supreme Court really went to great lengths to deny a woman's equal pay claim, and there Congress did step in, and they passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act. It's hard, though, to get Congress to act on a lot of these issues. And, corporate influence is so great that what we've actually seen was, for decades, the tort reform movement was strongly pressuring Congress to do things like make it harder to bring class actions, and to try to impose limits on punitive damages and things like that. So there are some things that it would be nice if Congress acted on, but so much of the pressure is coming from the corporate world and large donors that it's just a matter of stopping them from making the law worse. And we need the Supreme Court to, stand up for workers when they can.
And of course, we also have, the rash of voter restrictive laws that have been upheld by the Supreme Court. And in addition, I mean, really the sort of, I guess, the original sin of that was to gut Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was the formula in which we determined which states needed pre-clearance from the Department of Justice to change their voting laws in any fashion. And I think we've had dozens of instances over the past 6 or 7 years that the Supreme Court basically gutted Section 5. And you talk about judicial activism. I mean, the Scalia et al. were disparaging of the Senate reauthorizing that act. I mean, that was really stunning. Can you talk about that for just a bit? Because there was no more clear cut of a case, it seems to me, of judicial activism than their assault on the Voting Rights Act. They basically said that the Senate was too cowardly to actually deauthorize it.
You're exactly right. I mean, when you look at just, abominable recent decisions, that has to be very high on the list, because also remember what the Voting Rights Act was. It was the crown jewel of the civil rights movement. For years, our country was embroiled in the civil rights movement. Many people died fighting for the right to vote. Congress passes the Voting Rights Act, expressly to vindicate the rights that the civil rights movement was about. It's passed by a bipartisan Congress. It has to be reauthorized. So it is reauthorized year after year by bipartisan majorities in Congress. It's signed into law, the reauthorizations, by both Democratic and Republican presidents. George W. Bush signed a reauthorization and said very nice things about the act. So it's hard to think of a law that was more sacrosanct. And then when you add even just constitutionally, Congress gives the Constitution gives Congress very special authority to regulate elections. So Congress is at the height of its power here. And we all remember Chief Justice Roberts at his confirmation hearing said that he thought a judge should be an umpire, right, calling balls and strikes. So the idea that they would strike down this particular law, it's about as activist as you can imagine. And then when you look at the grounds on which they did it, Roberts talked about the equal dignity of the states, and it was just a made-up doctrine. And it's not just me saying that. Judge Richard Posner of the Seventh Circuit, who was appointed by Ronald Reagan as a big conservative, he wrote a piece afterwards in a popular journal saying that the constitutional ground that the court had struck down the pre-clearance requirement of the Voting Rights Act was made up, that it didn't exist. So the idea that they would do that was just outrageously activist and clearly results oriented. The 5 conservative justices just don't like the Voting Rights Act. But then, as you say, they were also in other voting cases, like the Indiana voter ID case, like the years of cases about partisan gerrymandering. They kept saying, well, we really have to leave it up to the localities, to the legislature, to election officials. We don't want to intrude and defend the rights of voters. So it's amazing how they take such a hands-off approach when it comes to maybe helping more people to vote, but when they have the opportunity to really gut the Voting Rights Act, they do it on absolutely crazy grounds. And it's hard to look at the voting cases and see anything other than that. There are 5 conservative justices who just seem to always rule in the way that will maximize the Republican vote in elections. They are ruling the way the Republican Party wants. And, it's, I think, really, shameful.
Now, the way that the court has been acting really in the past 10 years, more or less, in regards to voting rights is, it seems to me, from my perspective, very similar to the way that the court acted starting in like 1893 and began to sort of, in the wake of Reconstruction, began to allow these, the states essentially to chip away at voting rights. And in fact, the Voting Rights Act was sort of the culmination of basically saying, like, the court has over the years just eviscerated at least the intent of the 14th Amendment and going and others following Reconstruction. what does that say about the court as an institution? I mean, and then I want to pivot off of that as to what we can do about it. Because I mean, if the court, it seems to me that there's been this sort of like dance, right? Where the idea is that lawyers in particular in legal institutions want to maintain, and society at large on some level, although I don't feel like the right has done that, um, want to maintain this aspirational image of the Supreme Court as not political and as being guided by these principles and these laws and the Constitution, when in fact, like it seems to me that the interpretation of these laws is there's a lot of wiggle room in there, and it can fundamentally change the kind of society we have. If that's the case, what can we do in terms of reform?
Okay, so a couple of thoughts. One is from the beginning of your question, when you drew the analogy to the 1800s, I think that's exactly right. And, one of the points I make in the book is that the Warren Court that we began by talking about really was an anomaly, right? That was a little period of time in which the court was actually standing up for the underdog. But if you look at the rest of the history of the court, before the Civil War, they were upholding slavery in the Dred Scott decision. After the Civil War, they were upholding segregation in Plessy versus Ferguson. During the Progressive era, they were striking down progressive laws like the child labor laws. During the New Deal, they were striking down the early New Deal laws until, FDR threatened to pack the court. So we have had really a court that has stood up for the rich and powerful almost for the entirety of our history. The Warren Court was an exception. What do we do about that? Well, there are a lot of proposals out there. There are, reasonable people are saying if the Democrats were to win in the fall and to take both houses, that they should pack the court. And that would actually not be so difficult. A lot of reforms of the court require constitutional amendments. Adding to the number of justices does not. It did not originally begin as 9, and the Congress could just amend the law and make it 12 or 15, and then our next Democratic president could appoint more liberal justices. There are others though who really think that if you do that, you destroy the court, because every party that has a majority will do that when they can, and we then have just conceded that's a completely political branch. And there also is talk about maybe having retirement ages, because when the Constitution was written, we didn't have many people living into their 80s, and there was a very different idea as how long justices would serve. But I do think that there's no substitute for just winning the political battle. The Democrats need to win this next election, and they need to appoint justices the way the Republicans have been very good at. It is a battle for political control of the court, and the Republicans have done it better. They did it better with Abe Fortis. They did it better with Merrick Garland, and they do it better. They time their retirements better. Anthony Kennedy stepped down to make sure that there could be a young replacement for him, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer did not do that during the Obama administration. The Democrats really need to play to win to take back the court.
All right, so Adam, let me just challenge you a little bit here, and I say this as someone who was raised by a pack of lawyers and did a year of law school and still remains fascinated by all these things. Like, where does that begin? Right, like you just used examples of how Kennedy basically orchestrated this whole thing to get Kavanaugh on there, and there's been various different reporting about it, and we could probably argue to like what extent he did, but certainly Ginsburg and Breyer refused to sort of contemplate the idea that they would step down and sort of like put that type of strategy in their forefront of their minds. It's certainly their prerogative, and the idea that we need to win the political battle, but we hear stories of like, what was done with Fortis and the idea of like Merrick Garland. And I see Chris Coons going on the air, 6 months ago and saying, if we win back the Senate, the first thing we should do is reinstitute the filibuster for justices. I mean, this is like, at what point this comes from lawyers, and I understand it, right? I mean, like I say, I was raised by a lot of them. At what point does the sort of the broader institution of law, as distinct from, let's say, the conservative movement and all the lawyers who make up, who are who sort of that Venn diagram covers both of them. At what point do they say, we're going to give up the ghost on the Supreme Court not being a political body? Because it seems to me that, you've outlined that at the very least, the Republicans more aggressively gave up that ghost 50 years ago. But I think you can argue that coming out of Reconstruction, they had given up that ghost. It's just that the Democrats, the left, they don't seem to sort of be able to sort of let go of that vision of the Supreme Court.
I think that's right, and I think as a result, they're bringing, a water gun to a knife fight. I mean, McConnell has been very clear. He refused to, have any hearings at all for Merrick Garland, and then he went out of his way to tell a Kentucky audience not long ago, of course, if there were a vacancy in the last year of the Trump administration, we would certainly fill that. I mean, he is, he's thumbing his nose at Democrats and basically saying, we don't play by any rules. We're not trying to be ethical or principled. It's all about power for us. And I think liberals need to get more in that mindset. And, you do think about, Will Rogers saying, I'm not a member of an organized political party, I'm a Democrat. There's a way in which Republicans are just better at organizing themselves to win power. So I don't know that for a fact that Anthony Kennedy, talked with the White House about his successor, as has been reported, certainly, did anything like that. But, it does appear that he did resign at a time when he wasn't that old. He wasn't in terrible health. It was the last moment he knew that a Republican president could name a successor with, for sure, a Republican Senate. Republicans tend to do that, and there's statistics on how they're just much better at passing their conservative seats onto fellow conservatives. That just isn't the Democratic mindset. And, if we want to once again get rulings on behalf of the people we care about, I think Democrats need to think in those, really very calculating ways much more.
I mean, where does that start? I mean, because, the right, their voters are also a lot more tuned in to the implications of the court. I mean, there's just, of the myriad of reasons why Donald Trump, but fors as to why Donald Trump won, one of them very well could be because Mitch McConnell kept that seat open. And so where does this start? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, why aren't you, I don't mean to pick on you, but why aren't you coming out and saying, we got to pack the court. We got to give up the ghost. This is a political body. And this, at the very least, will force voters who vote from the center to the left to understand the implications of the court, because they clearly don't now.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And, I'm not quite there in court packing, but I see that, desperate times may require desperate measures. But I think, what we could all agree is it needs to be much more central to this political campaign. Like, a lot of us are very upset that we watch these, debates and the Supreme Court does not come up, right? The moderators often ask some pretty ridiculous questions. There should be much more focus on the Supreme Court. The Democratic candidates should have talked about it more and talked about it in a way that actually got to the swing voter. I mean, in my book, I show how, the court has really hurt the middle class, right? I mean, if you want to be a member of a union, if you want to have a minimum wage, if you want your politics not to be controlled by the richest 1% and by corporations, you need a different Supreme Court. And this should be front and center. And Biden did say he would name an African-American woman to the court. Great. But how about talking about naming justices who will stop the, plutocratic takeover of a lot of our society? That should be much more in the Democratic playbook every day.
Adam Cohen, the book is Supreme Inequality, the Supreme Court's 50-year battle for a more unjust America. We will put a link to the book on the site at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it, Sam. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, there it is, folks. You need motivation to go and vote for someone other than Donald Trump in the fall. I don't know why you would at this juncture, but if you do, that's a good one. That's the one that I've been harping on. Hopefully, keep our fingers crossed and he won't be filling another Supreme Court seat. He's already filled 180 plus federal judgeships across the country, lifetime appointments. We already are at a 5-4. You know, a lot of people are talking about that. How do I pronounce his name? Isaac Chotiner? Chotiner? In the New Yorker magazine, did sort of eviscerated another person in his questions. And this guy, Epstein, is it Richard Epstein, who's a big conservative legal thinker. And Neil Gorsuch apparently is just a huge fan of this guy. And I mean, he's a lunatic. And it's really just a matter of time before these 5 Supreme Court justices get more aggressive. The worst case scenario, and that happens when there's 6 of them. And then maybe 7, frankly. I mean, I think it would be stunning if Ginsburg and Breyer made it through another 4-year term. I don't even know that they're going to make it through this one. But, I mean, you know, end of discussion as far as I'm concerned. But your mileage may vary. But are you hopping on? What's going on? I hear some rustling.
Well, Chotner's stealing your bit, Sam, which is to let libertarians just talk and express themselves.
Son of a bitch. Son of a bitch. Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. And then he just, it really is. I almost feel like I want to read that out loud because it is so hilarious. Maybe we'll do that. I don't know. You know, we gotta think about what we're doing for April 1st. And, you know, tomorrow marks my 16th year anniversary in radio. You know, I'm not on radio anymore, but let's I got one more thing to add to the plugs and notices, and I'll drop this in again tomorrow, but I want to just read it now. Jamie's a good friend had a store called Cult Party, and it was co-op. It was closed due to the pandemic. They're a small business and they run as a co-op, and they were broken into over the weekend, and stuff was stolen. They may not survive. You can go and help out this this co-op at GoFundMe.com and Google for Cult Party Robbery. We will put this in the description, and then we'll read it again tomorrow. They are ineligible apparently for most of the COVID stimulus programs because they're run as a co-op, which is also a crap show. Ridiculous. A reminder, folks, this program relies on your support. If you can afford it at this time, if it does not create any financial insecurity for you at all, you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. If it does, or if you think it will, don't do it. And if it does, or you think it will, and you still want the extra content because you're sitting around at home, maybe you've lost your job, maybe you're having to care for somebody, whatever it is, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, and we will hook you up. Get it. Just have a little bit of patience. It takes a little while to get through that stuff, but we will get there. If you feel like you need to cancel, go and cancel. We have a couple of different options for you on how you can go about doing it. And this program should create zero financial stress for you. Zero. Don't even, like, if you have to think about it, then don't pay us. We will hook you up, and we will get through this. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, and chocolate. Their shipping still, it's a little bit slower, but better to ship it than to go out to a market if you can help it. Justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Also, the AM Quickie, it is available on our app. It is available on our YouTube page. Gives you a 5 to 7 or 8 minute breakdown of the top news of the day. Get your day started right. Don't forget also, you can check out the No McKee Show, patreon.com/the No McKee Show, and also on YouTube, No McKee Const. She is down in Arizona and dealing with all the stuff going on down there. I watched a vlog where she went in to get a test. She is with her mom. Her mom is immunocompromised. They are staying at their her grandparents' old house. Apparently they passed away a couple years ago. Check it out, and we'll be talking to No McKee maybe tomorrow, actually. Also, don't forget TMBS is tomorrow night, Matt. Tomorrow night, you can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS or on the YouTube channel, youtube.com, The Michael Brooks Show. Jamie, are you there? Well, Jamie, you can check out The Antifada, patreon.com/The Antifada. And Matt, what's happening with you've just upgraded. You're just
yeah, we're gonna Zoom record the Widow Ranter episode of Literary Hangover that's been delayed due to this pandemic, but we're gonna do it over Zoom. And also, I will be appearing on the Surfs YouTube channel or Twitch, one of the two. They're interviewing me tonight at 5:30 Eastern. So.
Whoa. All right, we got to take a quick break. Head off to the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
folks, it's the fun half. You know what that means. We try to have some fun around here. Are people noticing, Matt? Are people noticing that I upgraded the lights behind the backdrop? Are people?
More and more people are saying about it. Actually,
more and more people are talking about it. It's getting really big. It's getting really big now. No, my back is killing me. I did a lot of work this weekend just to get this stuff up and ready, and we have new and improved internets, both of us. Rock solid.
Made through a whole first half of the show today.
Yeah, and I've organized my lighting, and my kids helped me with all my cables this weekend, and I think what I'm going to do is give them the cable challenge. So I've got a big cabinet that I used to have all my CDs in. I have so many CDs. It's nuts. I have so much mixed media here. It's crazy. Boxes of like mini DV tapes, DV cam tapes, 8mm tapes, VHS C tapes, digibeta tapes, 3/4 inch tapes, some 8mm and 16mm film, CDs, mini discs, mini cassettes, and regular size cassettes. I probably have some 8-tracks around and more. But anyways, I emptied out my CD case, and I'm now using it to store all my cables, because the way that I have, all of the stuff I had was stuff that I had just accumulated and never threw out from the years. And so I patched stuff together. And that's why the first couple of days were so rough, because the computers I were using were from like 2009, 2010, 2011, that I had, upgraded the RAM. And, I'm trying to do that right now with a 2009 16-inch or 17-inch MacBook Pro that I had for, back at Air America days. And so what I'm thinking is dumping all the cables out and paying the kids $10 each if they can figure out where the cables go, just so that they learn about different types of formats and cables.
Seb Gorka records to digibeta.
Does he really?
No, I'm just making a beta joke.
Oh yeah, that's good. All right. Let's see. All right, let's get to it, shall we, folks? I'm sure that I'm not the only one, but I think I consider myself incredibly lucky that my work is online and I can continue work, both because it gives me something to do every day. Obviously, it keeps me having an income, and it also prevents me from starting to drink too early in the day, as I've been hearing from friends who are always like, hey, what time do you think it's appropriate? And I'm like, well, the pandemic happens only now and then. So, but it's not inconceivable that I would go on and do my show if I had already been indulging a little bit. And if I ever needed a how-to video to do that, it would be this. I give you Judge, what's her name again? Janine. doing her show. She must have a big TV or something in her house. And boy, I don't know what's going on. I think she's in what is she in Westchester? Where is she live? Do we know? Here she is. Apparently, they had to, she's in Westchester. Apparently, she was not on her first segment of her show. Apparently there were technical difficulties. And then she resolved the technical difficulties. I mean, look, they're doing it from home. It's a little bit difficult.
Is that a type of mixed drink, technical difficult?
It could very well be. Let's play this.
Welcome back to Justice. Just the other day, the president talked or was hoping about the possibility of reopening everything on Easter Sunday, and in a way where we could kind of come out of this quarantine, as loose as it may be, that we're involved in. And Lisa Booth, the Fox News contributor, is here to talk with us tonight about whether or not that's even a possibility. How are you, Lisa?
I would like to have seen more of that. I think I'm missing something by not watching that show on a regular basis. And I like that "Hey Judge" from the contributor was just sort of like, hanging in there. I wonder if she got like a, hey, listen, we're going to have to push your segment. I just wonder because Judge Janine is just, we're putting a little coffee in her right now. There's something like everybody in his orbit, right? Everybody in his orbit, Trump's orbit, who is older than the age of what I think 65, right? How old is Judge Janine? Kudlow, Rudy, Judge Janine, they all seem to. Let's see. We're just looking this up. A technical difficulty is 1 part Crush Xanax, 2 parts vermouth, 2 parts vodka, and she's 68. So that's what it is. I think look, why not? Right? Whatever gets you through this administration. But good for her. Good for her. Speaking of which, here's Larry Kudlow. And, you'll recall a month ago when Donald Trump came out, said, oh, there's only 15 cases. I think we're basically over it. We basically finished it, basically winding these down. And, Kudlow said, look, we're mostly contained. We're contained. It's a little leaky, but we're contained. They were having meetings in the White House in January. I got an email from a listener in Las Vegas. Mick Mulvaney was there before he was let go. Apparently, this guy was waiting on Mick Mulvaney. And he said the table was just laughing about how they were all going to make money off of this stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't have a hard time believing it. I don't think that they took this seriously. How could they? They fired all the experts who would have told them otherwise. But here is Larry Kudlow on with Martha Raddatz over the weekend on ABC This Week, asked, why did you provide the country with such incredible misinformation?
This virus, nobody expected this thing to come down as far and hard and widespread as it did, but it did. And we are Americans.
Mr. Kudlow, I want to stop you there just for a second, including you. It was also just a month ago you told CNBC that you thought the virus was contained in the country, even though doctors were warning otherwise. You also downplayed the threat of a long-lasting economic tragedy. You have since said that was based on facts at the time, but yes. Why should people trust you this morning with your prediction?
Look, I'm as good as the facts are, and at the time I made that statement, the facts were contained. The president had just put the travel restrictions on China, and a lot of people agreed with me. In fact, at the time, a lot of people felt that the flu was worse than this virus. But as soon as the facts changed, we've changed our whole posture and our whole...
Oh, my gosh. He also apparently is I don't know. He's just gotten very slurry since he's joined the administration. But the facts have not changed at all. Not one iota. Not one iota. The doctors were saying the exact same thing when he said that. We need to take this seriously. You had even Azar at Health and Human Services trying to get the president to take it seriously. He was more concerned about flavored vaping. They did not take this seriously because they fired all of the people in government whose job it was to tell them to take it seriously. They did not take this seriously because they were hoping that it would just blow over and there would be no implications for Donald Trump's economy or electoral chances. There is no doubt, and it's going to become clearer and clearer, how we have failed to respond to this crisis in the way that, I mean, against, you can put us up against every other country in the world. And our failure has been dismal. Dismal. And it's going to be worse. And we can blame the American public, but if you don't have leadership, federal leadership, saying whether you live in rural parts of the country, whether you live in urban parts of the country, whether you live on the coast, whether you live inland, whether you live to the north, whether you live to the south, you need to take this seriously. You need to take these certain steps. We need to shut it down for a period of time. We need to err on the side of caution. Unless we had even something like that, we couldn't possibly address this in the way that we needed to. Donald Trump is out there now saying 100,000 dead, that would be a win. He is comparing it to a number 2.5 million that projections would have called for that number of dead if we had done absolutely nothing. If every governor did nothing, if every mayor did nothing, the president of the United States did nothing, 2.5 million dead. Now he's hoping 100,000. Here is Joe Biden, knowing what we all know, that Donald Trump refused to take this seriously. Donald Trump fired the coordinator of pandemics in this country who sat on the National Security Council. That Donald Trump fired CDC representatives, 2/3 of the office in China, including the person who tracks pandemics and epidemics there. That Donald Trump refused to exercise his power under the Defense Production Act to get ventilators built, to get personal protection equipment manufactured and distributed. That Donald Trump is playing favorites with states that are important to him electorally, or with governors who kiss his butt. We know all this now. Joe Biden surely knows this. Here he is on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. He doesn't want to get too dramatic about it, though.
You know, your campaign put out in a critique of President Trump and says if he doesn't do these things, you know, he could cost lives. Do you think there is blood on the president's hands, considering the slow response, or is that too harsh of a criticism?
I think that's a little too harsh. I think what's happening is the failure to, as I watched a prelim to your show where someone said that used the phrase that the president just thinks out loud. He should stop thinking out loud and start thinking deeply. He should start listening to the scientists before he speaks. He should listen to the health experts. He should listen to his economists. He should, for example, the United States Congress passed a significant piece of legislation to help deal with the incredible financial crunch that's going to affect working families and all families, the whole economy. So we should be right now thinking about how do we get those small business loans out the door? Because right now you're not banks. That's not the the strong point of banks, focusing on getting small business loans out. That's for most of the employees. He should be focusing on making sure we're in a situation where we're able to see to it that unemployment benefits can get to people. What's the IRS doing to get those $1,200 checks to people, et cetera? That's where the focus should be, and it should be laser focus.
That may be true. But the bottom line is the American public needs to know that Donald Trump, it's not just a question he's thinking out loud. The American public needs to be reminded of what I just said going into that clip. All the things that Donald Trump did. And frankly, it's not just Donald Trump. The Republican Party perceives government as the enemy. This is an opportunity. I mean, it's not even an opportunity. It seems to me a prerequisite to getting out of this crisis is to remind people the importance of the federal government. To remind people the importance of government writ large. I mean, it's a stunning missed opportunity, both from an electoral perspective and in terms of our. Has there ever been a more clear opportunity of why our society needs to function as a unit? The whole thing with masks. It's all about a communitarian perspective of understanding, like, I don't know if I'm sick. I don't know if you're sick. This is what they said apparently in Czechoslovakia, was like, I wear my mask to protect me. This is a golden opportunity for Joe Biden to say those words that Ronald Reagan said 40 years ago. You know, watch out. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. We're wrong. Deadly wrong. And we see that Ronald Reagan's descendants, political descendants, who came in and attacked the CDC, the Koch brothers attacking the CDC, cut billions of dollars they wanted to from their budget. Fire the head of the pandemic coordination team, get rid of the position. Now we're seeing that they're privatizing and outsourcing the inspections to the people who are producing the meat. For the USDA, they're rolling back all the EPA regulations. This is a time for Joe Biden to get out there and make the case for why government is so important. And on some of the details. It really is, it's a missed opportunity. It also occurs to me that it may be a problem in the fall. We'll see. Hope spring is eternal. Meanwhile, the only person in the government who seems to be remotely competent has been there for 40 years almost. That's Anthony Fauci. He's the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. This guy has been walking a tightrope, trying to basically follow behind Donald Trump, like literally picking up his droppings so that they don't infect the entire country. Jake Tapper on Sunday saying anticipating between 100,000 and 200,000 deaths. Play this.
Any city will be spared from this virus. How many cases do you think the U.S. will reach? 1 million cases? 10 million cases? Or do we not even have any idea?
You know, Jake, to be honest with you, we don't really have any firm idea. There are things called models. And when they put in various assumptions, and the model is only as good and as accurate as assumptions. And whenever the modelers come in, they give a worst case scenario and a best case scenario. Generally, the reality is somewhere in the middle. I've never seen a model of the diseases that I've dealt with which the worst case scenario actually came out. They always overshoot. So when you use numbers like 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million, that almost certainly is off the chart. Now, it's not impossible, but very, very unlikely. So it's difficult to present. I mean, looking at what we're seeing now, you know, I would say between 100 and 200,000 cases, but I don't want to be held to that because I mean, we're going to have millions of cases, but I just don't think that we really need to make a projection when it's such a moving target that you can so easily be wrong and mislead people. What we do know, Jake, is that we got a serious problem in New York. We have a serious problem in New Orleans, and we're going to be developing serious problems. So although people like to model it, let's just look at the data of what we have and not worry about these worst case and best case scenarios.
I mean, there you have it. The models that projected 2 million, again, were if we did nothing. 100 to 200,000 is probably a perspective on what we know about what's happened in California, Seattle. California, they did their stay-at-home order early, and thus far, it seems to have inhibited the spread of the disease. Seattle, it seems to be working. In New York, we're much harder to get compliance, I think, and just there's a lot more density. People have been doing it now for about a week and a half, I'd say. A week, maybe officially. 2 weeks. And hopefully that will start to level things out in New York. But we have parts of the country. This is the thing that the modeling can't really capture. Like, what are the implications of an entire media apparatus, a significant chunk of the country, listening to a media narrative that has been saying this is overblown, it doesn't mean anything, that we should get back out there? I mean, when someone with some level of responsibility says we should get back out there, the implication is we can get back out there. And I don't know how many people respond to that message. I don't know how many out of 10 who hear that message and perceive that person as a trust agent, as it were, then go out and say, forget it. I mean, I think that is going to be, that may be like the second or third wave of problems that we have. That's what's going to happen in small rural communities. That's what's going to happen in even some of the urban centers that are in red states, as it were, using red states as a barometer of how much right-wing media is consumed. I think this is going to be a real problem. Going to be a real problem. Scary. Here's Donald Trump now. Apparently, Fauci sat him down and said, we're going to have between 100,000 and 200,000 deaths. And so Trump immediately says, okay, whatever. That's what will define as success. There he is from the White House garden.
I just want to reiterate, because a lot of people have been asking, well, what would have happened if we did nothing? Did nothing. We just wrote it out. And I've been asking that question to Tony and Deborah, and they've been talking to me about it for a long time. Other people have been asking that question. And I think we got our most accurate study today, or certainly most comprehensive. Think of the number, 2.2, potentially 2.2 million people if we did nothing. If we didn't do the distancing, if we didn't do all of the things that we're doing. Now, when you hear those numbers, you start to realize that with the kind of work we went through last week with the $2.2 trillion, it no longer sounds like a lot, right? So you're talking about, when I heard the number today, first time I've heard that number, because I've been asking the same question that some people have been asking, I felt even better about what we did last week with the $2.2 trillion, because you're talking about a potential of up to 2.2 million, and some people said it could even be higher than that. So you're talking about 2.2 million deaths, 2.2 million people from this. And so if we can hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000. So we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job. But
unbelievable. I love the fact that he's already like pre-congratulating himself. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, the what this guy was saying just 3 weeks ago. Yeah, pop up his tweeting, his ratings tweet. He's very excited, Donald Trump, because his press conferences are getting a lot of ratings. I mean, I am telling you, just as I told you he would insist on writing his name on those checks. I know that was low-hanging fruit, but nevertheless, we were still like 3 weeks out from talking about this. I am telling you that in the past week, he has been telling his advisors, this is good for me. This is working out well. If I had known, I would have done this before. We would have had another. If I had known, we would have had, maybe we could have ordered one, a pandemic. There's no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump has said something along those lines. Here is his, I'm just calling into, there's no doubt in my mind that this is where is he getting? Oh, this is on Monday on Fox News. On Fox News. This is unbelievable. President Trump is a ratings hit. This is a quote. This is a quote from Trump. And you don't even get to who it's attributed to the second tweet. President Trump is a ratings hit. Do you think he sits in the Oval Office and he's like, all right, transcribe Fox News at exactly 1:32 p.m. President Trump is a ratings hit. Since reviving the daily White House briefing, Mr. Trump and his coronavirus updates have attracted an average audience of 8.5 million on cable news, roughly the viewership of the season finale of The Bachelor. Numbers are contained. Nearly 12.2 million people watched Mr. Trump's briefing on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, according to Nielsen. Monday Night Football numbers. Millions more are watching on ABC, CBS, NBC online streaming sites, and the audience is expanding. On Monday, Fox News alone attracted 6.2 million viewers for the president's briefing, an astounding number for 6 p.m. cable broadcast, more akin to the viewership for a popular primetime sitcom. Oh, this is from the New York Times. The CBS News poll said 13% of Republicans trusted the news media for information about the virus. 13% from the New York Times. There you go. If I had known, we would have had more of these folks. We would have had a ton of them.
He should use the Monday Night Football music to announce his press conferences.
I don't know why they don't. There should be. I mean, it's just a matter of time, right? Before there's going to be some whoosh. And then like an ad. I saw a, we're on all sorts of email lists for the president, and trying to think of like what it was that he was trying to sell this afternoon. Where the heck? Oh, shoot. Where is this thing? I'll find it. It's President Trump. hurry, this is important. And then it's like, you can get a Trump gold card. Honestly, like it's just coronavirus briefing. Here's your brief. You can get t-shirts now for, I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I don't know. Are we 6 weeks away from that? 5 weeks away from that? 15 minutes away from that? I don't know. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
Mindy. How are you doing, Mindy?
Oh, I'm all right.
Okay.
I'm good. My daughter's best friend lives in Florida because her husband just finished his residency and he's moving back to Philadelphia. They're moving back to Philadelphia and they're looking for an apartment. She told my daughter that they're all going out in Florida. Like there's no restrictions on anything and they're all going out. Like nothing's wrong. So what do you think of that?
What do I think of that? I mean, I think that's a function of DeSantis basically pretending like there's no big issue here. He doesn't have to close the beaches. I mean, look, one of the things that they say about, everybody wearing masks, there's, it goes back and forth as to whether people say it protects you or not. It protects everybody because some people have it and they don't realize it. But the other way that it protects you is it basically signals to everybody in society, we got to be careful. And it makes isolation that much easier because you feel like everybody's doing it. Like the experience of going out to the market and being the only person wearing the mask, you feel like, maybe I don't need it or this and that. But if everybody's wearing masks, they do it. When the governor refuses to close the beaches, it sends a message out to everybody, not that serious. It's not that serious. And so, of course, everybody's going out. Of course.
Right, but she's flying in this weekend to look for an apartment and wants to see my daughter after she just has been gallivanting all around Florida.
No.
So that's
14 days.
That's where the problem
14 days. 14 days.
Right, so that's where the problem comes into play. Now, that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say to you is my husband owns a small business. He cuts hair for a living and he owns a shop. And he was able to get unemployment. So apparently he's telling his other friends like how to do it, and they're not getting far on the forms online. So I just wanted to tell everybody that there's a drop-down screen. Once you do it the right way, there's a drop-down screen where you put in your what do they call it? You put in your routing number for your checking account. So basically you're like kind of getting like pre-approved for it. So if you don't get up to that screen, I don't know if you're going to get insurance, the unemployment. So everybody should just
do a video.
Like if you can't, what? If you can't figure out, if you don't get to that screen, I mean, my husband's willing to help people.
Do a video.
If you want, what?
Have him do a video.
My husband can do a video. He's as loud as I am. That's how.
What?
My husband is the complete opposite.
What? No, listen. You don't have to. He doesn't have to be on it. All you do is you actually go through the screens, and if there's other ways of doing it on your computer, but you can just videotape the computer monitor with your phone. Do a 2-minute video.
And then can I send it to you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that because I said, will you help people? Because there's a ton of people in Majority Report that don't, probably know how to do this because it's so technical. And he got through. So all his friends are calling, like all of our friends own small businesses and they're all calling him. And he's like, he was able to get it for the guy that cuts my hair and he was able to get it for the shop, another shop owner. So I'll do that. I'll absolutely do that. Very last thing.
Make it as tight as possible. Make it as tight as possible. Just go right through it.
I'll do that today.
Okay.
He's completely opposite of me. Oh, I got shut down on Twitter. I got suspended on Twitter.
What did you do? What did you do?
Over the last 3 years, I have been sharing songs from YouTube, from the YouTube share button to Twitter. Okay, so I shared from Twitter, the YouTube share button to Twitter, and I got shut down because I had 51 songs over 4 years, and they shut me down. And the one song they keep citing is Bill Withers' "Lean on Me." So I can't sue them because my courthouse is closed, and I've been like calling this guy in England like every day. But I'm kind of cool with it. Like, I'm not that upset about it. I opened up a new account, and I'm fine with it. I just hope they don't shut my new account. So
Should we
I don't know.
do we announce your new account, or what do we do?
Sure. I'll give you Mayday Mindy 1.
Mayday Mindy 1. Okay.
Mayday Mindy 1.
There you
It's
go.
kind of fun having the small, Mayday Mindy 1. It's kind of fun having the smaller follower. I mean, still follow me, but it's kind of fun because like now I can talk to people because my feed doesn't move fast. So it's kind of fun, but I'm not freaked out about it. I thought I'd be really freaked out about it, and I'm not really that upset. I just want to connect with people. So like I was tweeting out about you and nobody sees because they don't know who I am. So it's not that big of a deal, but just, you've been keeping me, very last thing, you've been keeping everybody I know sane. I mean, I just can't wait till, like, it's starting around 11:30. I just like, when's Sam going to be on? You're like my only like ray of, I don't know, not hope because we're all depressed, but
right.
I don't know. I just feel connected when you talk, and I'm sure everybody else feels that way. And just everybody's really scared and nervous, and I don't know. I'm just happy you're here.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call,
That's
Mindy.
all.
Thanks for the nice words. Hang in there and send me the video, and we'll get it out there.
I will. I'll do the video. I will
All right.
absolutely do the video. I didn't know this story about my sister, but I'll call back during the week about that, the Trump supporter. But I'm not in the mood to be funny, so
Okay.
I'll call you during the week.
We'll do it another
All
time.
right. Mayday Mindy 1. Mayday Mindy 1.
Mayday Windy 1. Okay.
Bye.
What is this, Brendan? Ainsley Earhart she's she's on a cruise ship? What? Or she's referring to?
Yeah, it's Ron DeSantis saying that the thing we should worry about with the cruise ship coming into Fort Lauderdale is that there are foreigners on it, not that there are people.
This is insanity. Like, the idea that you're in Florida and you're worried about foreigners coming in now. I got news for you, folks. It's there already. And there are beaches that are so crowded. You know, one of the things that has been some of the hardest hit places apparently have been ski resorts. I think of the top 10 areas, like a couple of them are ski resorts because close proximity to other people. You're on the lifts, I guess, you know, your nose is running, you're wiping your glove on your face. I don't know. But I guess beaches we'll find out about soon. Speaking of Florida, like I say, Governor DeSantis has been refusing to take any sort of broad steps about this. Knock on wood, there has been no sort of like clear indication that they have a massive problem yet, but I have a feeling that we're just a couple of days away. But Donald Trump is playing favorites with states, not based necessarily on their need, but based upon his relationship with the governors. That is a effed up way to be doling out federal services. Here he is asked by a reporter in the White House garden. We don't know who she is, about that dynamic. This is clip number 4.
States like Florida have reportedly had 100% of their requests for supplies from the National Strategic Stockpile filled, but other states like Massachusetts have not. So how is that assessment being made, and why has Florida gotten its request
Well,
fulfilled?
I think you're going to find that almost all states. Look, I was on the call yesterday with the governors, and they were happy with the job we're doing. And I'll tell you what, if you had a different administration, they would not have been happy. These are people that speak their mind. They were happy. It was falsely reported by a couple of people that, oh, gee, they weren't. They were happy. They were thrilled. Florida has been taken care of, and Michigan has been taken care of. Very important state. To me, it's very important because I'm so proud of what we've done bringing car companies back into Michigan. And we're now dealing with the governor. And I think, Mike, I can say that a lot of good things are happening in Michigan. Massachusetts, we're dealing with the governor very strongly, and we're trying to get things to Massachusetts as rapidly as possible.
But why has Florida received 100% of its requests compared to some other states? Is there a reason?
Florida, look, they're very aggressive in trying to get things, and they're doing a very good job. But I think I can say all of the governors are very committed. We're very committed. We're working together. And we're getting things out at a level that nobody's ever seen before. You can speak to FedEx, you can speak to UPS, you can speak. They've never done anything like this.
I mean, part of that is just a jibber jabber, but the most relevant quote, when she asked directly, why is Florida getting 100% of what they're asking for and nobody else is? They've been very aggressive in trying to get things. DeSantis is just is kissing his ass and is a supporter of his. That's why. It's despicable. I don't know if it'll be enough. I mean, on some level, this is, it may make some sense insofar as we know that by the way that DeSantis has been dealing with this, there could very well be a real massive surge there. Certainly, everybody who's gone to that beach, Mindy's talking about, she's got her friend or relative who's coming in, wants to see her daughter. No. You gotta wait 14 days. You've been out on the beach. I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd, the perspective people have on this. You have to be overly cautious. Have to be. Let's get a little more into this. There's another clip from that same press conference where Trump is more directly taken to task on his treatment of governors that he thinks hasn't been going, haven't been fair to him. And yeah, that's a lie. Let's play that one. And understand, he knows that Michigan is important to him. Florida is very crucial to him in terms of like getting reelected. In Michigan, he sort of dropped the ball because he made it clear that he wasn't going to deal with that woman. That's the governor of Michigan, Whitmer. And she is liked in Michigan. Donald Trump withholding assistance. In fact, yeah, let's play this clip and then we'll get to Pam Karlan giving us a foreshadowing of something like this. Here's Donald Trump. He's asked yesterday about comments he's been making, basically saying that, like, look, if they're not nice to me and they're not giving me the PR I need and want right now, you people don't, nice hospital you had there. Shame if you lose it.
I don't think it would be good.
Thank you, sir. I'd also like to ask you about some comments you made on Friday. You were talking about governors of different states, and you said, I want them to be appreciative. You also said, if they don't treat you right, I don't call. These are direct quotes, sir.
Excuse me. Ready? Take a look at what I said. I want them to be appreciative of me, okay? And then you cut it off because it's fake news.
You and of your administration,
listen,
absolutely.
Please, let me just finish. You just said it again, and you know the answer's a lie. You know that
I could read you your full comments, sir,
let me
if
just
that
say,
would
look,
be easier.
Your statement and your answer is a lie, because here's the story. You ready? I said, I want you to be appreciative of me, and then you go on, and then I go on, and you cut it off. But it says,
you said,
because
I
when
want
you're
them
not,
to be appreciative. I don't want them to say things that aren't true. I want them to be appreciative. We've done a great job. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about Mike Pence, the task force. I'm talking about FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you.
But then you went on to say, if they don't treat you right, I don't call. He's a different type of person.
I don't call.
Referring to
no,
the
I
vice
don't
president.
call. No, I don't. Mike Pence calls. and the head of FEMA calls, I don't stop them. Did I ever ask you to do anything negative, Mike, to Washington, the state of Washington? Michigan, I love that state. That's one of my favorite places in the whole world, Michigan. And I'm so proud of what's happened with the auto industry. It's coming.
Let me give you an example of how this works. Matt, I have a real problem with creationist cat.
Okay.
All right. I got a real problem with that. I'm never going to talk to that guy. He's despicable. That cat goes around. It's a huge, thinks he knows everything. That creationist cat. Tough guy. Okay. Now, Matt, are you going to go and promote creationist cat on this program? Are you going to go and be on that show? I would never, ever go on that show. I would be disgusted by anybody who ever went on that show.
I would say my independence would drive me to want to, but probably not right now.
Right. Now, we don't have the same relationship that Donald Trump and Mike Pence has, or the head of FEMA or other subsidiary people in the government. But people get the message. If you drag your feet, if you don't respond, this is the bridge case all over again. This is shutting down the George Washington Bridge, the lanes to the George Washington Bridge all over again. Same MO. About to have a traffic jam in New Jersey. Same MO. Is this reprehensible? Yes. Is it shocking? Yes. Is it predictable? Oh, yes. In fact, here's Pam Carlin, law professor from Stanford, when she was talking about, when she was testifying about impeachment, trying to come up with an analogy so people understood what was going on. Here it is.
As President John Kennedy declared, the right to vote in a free American election is the most powerful and precious right in the world. But our elections become less free when they are distorted by foreign interference. What happened in 2016 was bad enough. There is widespread agreement that Russian operatives intervened to manipulate our political process. But that distortion is magnified if a sitting president abuses the powers of his office actually to invite foreign intervention. To see why, imagine living in a part of Louisiana or Texas that's prone to devastating hurricanes and flooding. What would you think if you lived there and your governor asked for a meeting with the president to discuss getting disaster aid that Congress has provided for? What would you think if that president said, I would like you to do us a favor. I'll meet with you and I'll send the disaster relief once you brand my opponent a criminal. Wouldn't you know in your gut that such a president had abused his office, that he betrayed the national interest, and that he was trying to corrupt the electoral process? I believe that the evidentiary record shows wrongful acts on that scale here. It shows a president who delayed meeting a foreign leader.
I mean, there it is.
Providing assistance that Congress.
There it is. I'm not going to talk to the woman. I'm not going to talk to her. You know, they got to be nice to me. They got to say good things about me and what I'm doing, so I don't get all the ventilators there. Ventilators, schmentilators, it doesn't matter. As long as they say good things about me, I'll be good to them.
Did they put my picture up in the office?
Is there a picture in the office? Well, I'll tell you what. You take a selfie of yourself next to my picture in the background. Then we will talk about the masks. Then we will talk about me getting a company to make more ventilators. Otherwise, I'm busy. I got some golf to play. I mean, that's what we're watching. We're watching this in real time. Watching it in real time. Here's Donald Trump. And I watched, this is clip number 6. I watched, we didn't pull this, but Andrew Cuomo gave what I thought was had some pretty good remarks to make. As they were opening up the Javits Center, the National Guard, I guess, went in there and sort of retrofitted it to be an ICU hospital, essentially. And he had some very, I'm not a fan of his in terms of what he's done as governor in many instances. And I am appreciative that he has allowed Governor Nixon to push her initiatives in New York State. But the guy gave a moving set of remarks to the people and reminded, everyone there that they are on the front lines, that you have people who are going in every day willingly risking exposure to this. Ages 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We're seeing people of all those ages in the ICU, seeing people of all those ages die. These folks have family members at home. They are under-equipped. And Donald Trump, he's mad at Andrew Cuomo. And so this is the way that he reacts. Clip number 6.
For years, 10 to 20,000 masks. Okay, it's a New York hospital. It's packed all the time. How do you go from 10 to 20 to 300,000? 10 to 20,000 masks to 300,000, even though this is different. Something's going on, and you ought to look into it as reporters. Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door? How do you go from 10,000 to 300,000? And we have that in a lot of different places. So somebody should probably look into that, because I just don't see from a practical standpoint how that's possible to go from that to that. And we have that happening in numerous places.
So he gets a request for masks, and he speculates these are a lot of masks. What are they doing with them? Because, because Donald Trump is a medical expert. He's really good at this. What are they doing with all these masks? Well, in his feeble-minded brain, the only thing he can think of is like, it must be some type of scam. Because, of course, it's the one thing he's attuned to. So, of course, in these hospitals where you need to bring up an 18-wheeler that is refrigerated for all the bodies because there's no room in the morgue, of course, what these nurses or doctors are doing is they're taking boxes of masks and they're going and they're selling them out the back door, selling them on the black market. They're setting up their eBay site, their eBay store, and they're price gouging on the masks that they got from the government. Of course, that's what's going on. You know how demented you have to be to actually have that thought that these masks you're sending to the hospital at this time are being shuttled to the black market without any evidence whatsoever? And then, do you know how demented you have to be to articulate that? I mean, just contemplate this for a moment. I could see you have a moment where you're like, oh, I thought this, and, maybe I'll bring it up with my advisors. There's no chance that, right? I mean, do we have safeguards for this? Because these masks are really important. We need to make sure that we're distributing them around the country where they're needed. I mean, it's very crucial that we do this in the most efficient way possible, because we need to get masks to a lot of different places. We dropped the ball on this, So I really want to make sure that we have the proper controls, because we need to distribute these masks all over the place. I mean, I can imagine having that conversation with an advisor, but to go out and say, we should have reporters should get on this. Should look into this. Spend their time going to see if there's doctors who are going out, walking out the back door with all these masks because they don't have enough to do in their hospitals. It's demented, right? I mean, it's completely demented. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Aaron from Nebraska.
Aaron from Nebraska. It sounds like Kowalski from Nebraska.
Yeah, it's one and the same.
Whoa. All right. Throw a curveball.
Yeah. Hey, am I sounding all right? I've got you on the hands-free in the semi.
No, you sound good. Are you driving a semi now?
Well, I'm parked at the moment. I'm at the fertilizer plant.
All right. Well, you're the third person to call us from the fertilizer plant today. So what's on your mind?
Ominous.
Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit away from the virus, although kind of important. But anywho, the election. From what I can gather, I really do not see how Trump is not going to win re-election at this point. This might sound like really disheartening to your viewers, but from what I can gather, most of the people I know think Trump has handled this very well. And like, this is going to be really sad to say, but come November, in the event there's a second flare-up come fall of this outbreak, the cities are going to be so shell-shocked. I really don't see how the Democrats are going to be able to pull in the numbers, especially with somebody as, you know, uninspiring as Biden. Like, does that make sense on your end of things, or do you think I'm just being overly pessimistic?
I don't know, but what you're saying to me does not sound off the wall. I mean, I think part of the reason why people are giving Trump such high marks for his handling of this.
That and the resource allocation seems almost, you know, focused solely on the swing states, which are the only ones you really got to win. I mean, Michigan and Florida, that's pretty important come the election. I have a feeling the same thing's going to happen with Pennsylvania. That, and if Philadelphia suffers, the president's better off. Like, it's really sad to say it that way, but like, the rural areas are going to be the last places hit. They're going to recover faster. We're already spread out. It's going to affect us the least. I mean, most of the small towns that I've gone to now, they've got plexiglass windows up on all of the retail areas. Everyone's wearing gloves. I mean, we just don't have the density for this to be as big of a problem.
Right. I mean, I think
they won't be as shell shocked.
I think there's some truth to what you're saying. I think there may be some areas that are hit hard that may happen later. I want to say that the scenario you're talking about is crazy. It's not, and it is, you know, I will say, let me put it this way. In 2016, around the arguments that I was having with Jimmy Dore about the danger of electing Trump, literally the two things that I remember, you know, aside from the Supreme Court, which in my mind obviously is, you know, it's not in other people's minds, but in terms of why I was afraid that it wasn't such a slam dunk that Trump, regardless of how he functions, could get reelected, is that I think I said specifically after George Bush, we got Barack Obama's policies. There's no reason to believe that after Donald Trump, we wouldn't get something, you know, even less radical or progressive. And Joe Biden is that. I would have never contemplated that Joe Biden would have been sort of physically capable of running for president at that time. And the other thing was, I said, and God help us, that we get another 9/11. And in many respects, that's what we're seeing. The dynamic is a little bit different, but the way that the American public is reacting, which is, you know, to rally around our leaders, regardless of what the actual sort of story is, I think, you know, it's possible. I also have to say, though, that I think there is still a tremendous amount of desire to get Donald Trump out. But I think if we do have a recurrence of what's going on and we haven't set up vote by mail by then, I think it could be a problem. I agree with you.
One thing I do want to leave you on is a little bit more of an optimistic note. Whether Trump wins or loses, I'm pretty sure that this whole situation has completely changed the mindset of a lot of people in the Republican Party. Because from what I can gather from most of the people that were like always against these, minimum wage raises and the power of labor, that is really starting to change now that like the service industry hasn't really stopped in a lot of places. We're starting to see that, McDonald's can function without their CEOs. That, like the guys at the top are not as important. And I think, this will have long-lasting effects for the labor movement itself. Like there's a lot of people now that are understanding that people who work in the service industry deserve a higher minimum wage. So that could be a positive that comes out of all of this.
I think there's going to be societal sort of contemplation of a lot of different things that are going to be helpful for that it's made people aware of. Yes. Whether we will be in a position to act upon that in the short term or even the midterm, I don't know. But appreciate the call, Aaron.
All right. Stay sane, everyone. Wash your hands and good luck. Bye.
Good luck. I'm glad to hear. Oh, did I just hang up on myself? I did. I'm glad to hear that in some of those rural areas, people are taking it seriously. I don't think it's happening as much as one would expect or hope anyways, but maybe in Nebraska more so. Let's go to 510. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Wow, crazy. Hello.
Hello.
This is, Sam.
Sorry.
First time calling.
Sam?
This is Scott from Sad Vicious, San Ho, California.
Scott, how are you? What's on your mind?
First time, long time.
Okay, beautiful.
I'm a member.
Whoa, 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 whoa. In that case. Get the sense
That was a lengthy shofar. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I go by Cucklord on the IMs. I haven't used the IMs, but I go by that name because I was brought into the show from seeing an Instagram post by Ted Leo just after 2016 election. It was his only non-cat or vegan food post that I'd seen in a long time. So I thought it was worth checking out, and that's what brought me to the show.
Cool. Thank you, Ted.
Yeah, I know you like to hear how folks found the show. So that's my story, and I've listened to probably every single episode since then.
Wow. All right.
Just a little quick housekeeping. Big shout out to the dude that called up 2 years ago and did a John from San Antonio impression. That was just a jumble of units of measurement and numbers.
Ronald Reagan. Yeah. Okay.
Also, big up to Michael for his Seb Gorka impressions during the War on Christmas 2016.
Okay.
I missed the heavy impressions period. I know some people weren't into it, but it was one of my favorite periods of the franchise.
I appreciate that. Yes, I like that too.
Yeah, I'm just kind of reviewing. I've got a backlog here, like I said. Been listening a long time. Just kind of need to get some of this stuff out of the way. Big shout to Jamie. Jamie, you rule. Your willingness to put up with this circus day after day inspires me to be more brave and more honest. To put up with Sam, his male rage, and his complete incompetence in understanding who Aubrey Plaza is.
Who? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep. No, it's fine. And Sam, thank you to you and everybody on the show for doing this. The dialogue on the show has really helped me put the disjointed pieces of the social political puzzle together in a way that I can understand. I was a registered Green Party member at age 18. I voted for Ralph Nader twice, became a Dem to vote for Obama in his first primary. But then, in the Obama years, things started not making sense in some way, and I didn't really have a good media source to hear dialogue about what I was thinking about, and Majority Report really does that for me. I started getting really worried in the lead up to 2016 when PBS NewsHour did a segment on Trump campaigners, and after 3 days of following them, they never realized that these people were covered in Nazi tattoos, and I started getting a little tripped out about that, and I felt like a lot of liberals didn't really see what was coming and how we were going to get affected by some stuff that I think a lot of people couldn't even fathom. Finally, I know you don't have a lot of time here, Sam. During those years, I used to run like a fancy grass-fed meat company.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of holes in eco-capitalism. I saw the myths built into getting to people to do shitty jobs for less money. I got sick of being in business, and in part because of this show, and namely because of Ronald Reagan, the ruler, I went looking for a job that I could do in which I could commit myself more to doing some drudgery for justice. I got certified by the federal government to do a job as a claimant rep for SSA, Social Security. And on March 3rd, I won my first hearing in front of a judge for a claimant, a woman, a longshoreman, got her disability for 2 years in which she was disabled. And I had made a pledge to myself that when I won my first hearing, I was going to call into the show.
Oh, great.
And so that's why I've given you this lengthy, pointless tirade and review of the last few years.
Are you going to want another
you all have really
shofar
helped me
for
maintain
this?
my sanity and my focus during that time.
Are you going to want another shofar for that? Or, hey, you know what? You're going to
Well, when you did the shofar in the beginning, I was like, you're a little early on that. I hadn't gotten to the
There you go.
Boom! 2 shofars. It's a 2 shofar call.
I don't know if that's
God.
ever happened.
This is the best day ever.
I'm feeling pretty generous. That's great.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Well, congratulations and thanks for calling in, and appreciate your listening and all you had to say. I've just set up the IMs. I thought it wasn't working, but for whatever reason, it is. I thought it was not, and so this is good news. Bullprog, feeling like a dinosaur in solidarity with Matt. It's after 3 o'clock somewhere. King of all IMers. Sam, what do you think of wealthy city dwellers living in urban areas for less density during the pandemic? What do you think it means for urbanism and YIMBYism in the U.S.? Oh, leaving urban areas for less density. I mean, when I was living up here full time, there were people who were referred to as 9/11ers. And a lot of people moved up state after 9/11 from New York City. I remember when I was looking for my office downtown to do Cedar on Sundays, one of the guys I was talking to was mad because people in the wave before me had stopped the construction of a coal-fired power plant, or not power plant, a coal-powered cement plant across the river, I think it was. There was a movie made about it, 2 Mile Square, maybe. And they had stopped this power plant, which would have spewed all sorts of like mercury in the air. It would have been a horrible thing. But people were mad about it. Some of the locals were mad about it. I mean, I think there's going to be people leaving the cities. I don't know how many, but I think it's possible. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, babe, swipe left. We need some social distancing, and you need to stay 6 feet apart. I'm not sure. I get it. Sick in Washington. We still can't know if anything's working in Washington state. Still insufficient testing as we do not have the supplies to carry the testing out. Matt from Mass. Sam, it finally happened. Situation bleak here. Tom Brady got traded to Tampa. I know. All of Massachusetts is devastated. People can't even leave their homes. Now I'm hearing Duncan's my close. What are we supposed to run on, Sam? At least the friggin' Packy is still open, although I heard something's going on with Corona. They got, I don't know. Pray for us, Sam. We've been trying to figure out whether we should do a bit for April Fools. I got to talk to Michael about this. I just don't know. I really don't know. It may be one of those things that is a good release because obviously coronavirus would play into it, but I don't know. Calling from a 646 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? This is David in Brooklyn.
David in Brooklyn. What's on your mind?
Well, I tell you what. I'm so glad to talk to you. Love you guys for a long time. I have a backup if you don't want to talk about this. But I just was curious if you had any thoughts on why this guy named Specter is such a douche online right now.
I mean, to be honest with you, I have not followed.
It's gotten bad.
I don't know if I want to know the details, to be honest with you.
It's just very, it just doesn't seem like the kind of guy who at one time was reasonable and worth listening to. To follow him now is I think he's in David from Jennifer Rubin territory, and it's weird.
Well, I think,
he's particularly, can I tell you, he's particularly disgusted with Bernie. And I just, I've always thought that was kind of always like something of a barometer for me. Like, I just never understood how anybody could like really be, find his Bernie to be someone like to be angry with. Like, that showed me that you're not, being totally honest. I felt like.
I know a lot of people who are like that, and I'm not quite sure. I think, look, I think that Sanders became, for people, really sort of, it's highly polarized, I think, in this regard. I think for some people, Sanders became a very, very convenient repository for their frustration and, about Trump and about Clinton's loss. I think it was a convenient thing to do. And I think people also project onto Sanders, aspects of some of his online supporters. I think part of it is like sort of weirdly generational. Like, there is some resent about younger people that's embedded in this in some weird ways, in ways that I'm not sure that that those people are aware of that, because on some level, Sanders doesn't per se, but certainly his agenda set represents the future. And I think there are people, because it tends to be, the people I've talked to tend to universally be older, and I think that plays into it. I also think there are people who are supportive of Sanders who, can't see any flaws in him as an individual, can't see any flaws in, the campaign, or just the limits of the campaign, because they want to convince themselves that we're in a different place than we are in terms of the left's power in this country. And, for me personally, I tend not to get that involved emotionally with politicians unless they are responsible, in my mind, for horrific acts that, have led in a fairly straight line to the deaths of a ton of people. And so, yeah, I don't understand why people get that emotionally riled about Sanders. I mean, look, I got some pushback from bringing up the allegation against Biden. And, from people who immediately goes towards, Bernie's campaign is over. And look, I have been referring to Joe Biden as the presumptive nominee for multiple weeks now. I don't know when it started. I can't even remember what day it is today. And I don't think that that allegation is going to sideline Biden. I don't want Biden as the nominee for a myriad of other reasons. And I've got about 3 or 4 other people, aside from Bernie, that I would much rather, that ran in that campaign, that I would rather than Biden to start off, to be honest with you. Just on sheer question as to whether he can beat Donald Trump.
Can I just say the thing that it's just disheartening when you because we everybody contributes in ways that they can, but you want to feel like people that are on your side are on your side. And for me in these days, and this will be all I say, and I'll hang up and let you go, and I love you guys, but since W, it's been really tough. Like, the thing that's been important to me is feeling like the people that I listen to and trust, we share the same reality and we argue honestly. Like, even when we disagree, there's an adherence to, a reality-based argument. And I feel like some of the people that were, maybe frustrated, or I'll just speak for myself, some of the people I'm frustrated with, who I thought were on the reality team, aren't operating with that being their guiding light, and they're being disingenuous at times. And that's what's so disappointing to me, because, I mean, like I said, I just, things get so, things are obviously so crazy right now. That's what I cling to, is just that is what can we agree on that's real and move forward from there? Because otherwise, what do we have?
Right.
Anyway, thanks so much.
Without knowing the specifics, I can't say, but I can just tell you, and I'm going to let you go, but I can tell you this, that, like, I have, since the beginning of doing this, have tried to basically, my perspective has been to try and push towards the left at a point where I think it is the most productive. I'm trying to think of how I articulate this. I have my perception of where society is in terms of what our society is open to in terms of left policies. And I have tried to push towards the left at those places through different mechanisms, right? And my perception has always been, or I should say, at least during the Bush years, was always that everybody else was doing the same thing, right? Like, most of the people I would talk to on Air America, I just assumed, like, oh, our politics are simpatico because we're agreeing on X, Y, and Z. But it was very contextualized, which I did not realize. It was contextualized in the sense that, oh, I think that our politics are simpatico because we're both against George Bush. And then in the years after the Democrats took the Congress in 2006, in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, I started to realize, like, oh, my politics are not as aligned with these people as I thought at that time. And part of it was sometimes people change in their perspectives. That happens to some people. Sometimes the context reveals different things about different people. Sometimes it's a combination of both. And so there are plenty of people that I would, that I thought I was completely aligned with politically in 2007, that today, one of those two things has happened, or both those things have happened. The contexts have changed over the years, and I or they have changed. I mean, I don't think that my politics have really fundamentally changed in that time. I think I may have gotten a little bit more knowledgeable about certain things, a little bit less concerned about maybe the deficit, a little bit more knowledgeable about things like who's holding our debt and the relevance of that. But I think you can go back in 2005 and hear me talking about wanting to nationalize the oil refineries and nationalize our power generation and our cable, our internet systems. I mean, more or less, I think where I was, I may be a little more sophisticated about things, but over in different contexts, you see different things about people. I mean, that happens in our private lives too, right? You may have thought like, oh, this is exactly the person I'd want to be quarantined with. And then you realize, no, it's not. Or, well, I'm going to stop there. Let's go to, here's Fox and Friends. And this is, I don't know, this Fox and Friends, they're doing their mailbag questions. And, well, let's play this clip. I don't even know how to grok this.
An email from Kevin for you, Mr. President. If there is another relief bill, how can we stop lawmakers from dipping into it again for special interest projects? Man, we were just talking about this. Do you want to expand? Can we stop the next one?
It's just the common facts. I mean, they have a majority in the House, and therefore you need their vote, and they want to get certain things. I will tell you this. If you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy. And
an email.
So the special interests that Donald Trump accuses the Democrats of trying to put in there. First of all, we've gone through the stimulus, and it is a crap show. The stimulus gives not only $500 billion straight away to businesses, but then the Fed is going to leverage that times 10, maybe 8 billions of dollars to one segment of the population, major corporations, who are under the yellow flag that we're all living under right now, are going to have the green flag. And they're going to take that free money and they're going to create more wealth with it. Super easy to do when you're given all that free money. They're going to get backstopped if they go out and gamble it. The Democrats did not exercise that leverage that Donald Trump points out that they had. Apparently, what they were looking for is levels of voting. Things like you can vote. Things like you can vote by mail-in ballot, or that election day, I don't know what they were claiming that they were going for. Election day is a holiday. All that crazy stuff. Special interest stuff, like people can vote. He can't even come up with a good lie about it. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. they're going to come back for another bite at this apple. And Democrats better be prepared now. The excuse that time is running out, that we have to get something out the door, is over. I didn't buy it in the first instance, but now the excuse is gone. They need to do some real support for non-corporations, hospitals. There needs to be lasting structural change that comes out of these things too. I don't know how a lot of people are going to get this, these $1,200. You're going to have to get a check for a lot of people if you're not already doing like a electronic transfer on the IRS. And what are you supposed to do with that? This voting stuff, it's nuts. It's crazy. All right, let me take, oh gosh. All right. Let me take one more phone call. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't realize what time it was. Calling from a 516 area code. You are the final call of the day, and then I'll take a couple IMs and then I'll get out of here. I'm in charge of Saul's lesson plan right now.
Is this me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Andrew from Long Island. How you doing?
Good. Andrew from Long Island. What's on your mind?
So I'm calling. I work in the healthcare industry. I'm not a provider, but I work for an employer of physicians at like a lot of Long Island hospitals. And I mean, not to kind of like end on a dour note, but like I talk to a lot of physicians on a daily basis, and they're scared, man. They're like freaking out on just like having not even like shields or whatever, but just gloves and just like being able to like practice medicine. I have an interest in 3D printing. I don't know if anyone else does, but you can go online and find a 3D printable face shield you can make at home. Stony Brook Hospital out on Long Island is taking donations, so if anyone wants to contribute, please do so. Very easy to find if you Google it. Says it.
If you have a specific link, send me an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com and put plugs and notices in it, and I will include it in tomorrow's plugs and notices.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate it. Keep safe out there.
Where are the doctors that you're talking to? Where are they located?
So they're all across Long Island. They're a large health system. I don't want to dox anybody. But,
Right. No, I understand.
Like, the largest healthcare system on Long Island. I think that's probably enough to know, whoever's here.
I was just curious about the geographic region. All right. Well, fair enough.
Yeah, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx area, Nassau, Suffolk, pretty much across the area.
All right. Well, appreciate the phone call. All right, folks.
Yeah, no.
That is the time for the calls today. I apologize. We're going to set up a system where we'll get notifications when I go live. And I'm going to try, I'm juggling the kids, and I'm going to try and, maybe have some sessions where we'll take some phone calls and do some sort of impromptu shows. All right, let me just take 5 IMs and we'll get out of here. Jay Rocks, that caller was amazing. I'm not sure who you were talking about. Best well when left. Ask anyone ask if everyone falling behind Biden was related to the DNC, seeing how bad COVID would be. I'd be surprised if that was the case. Pajama Boy, Sam, can you have a debate with Michael Tracy again? I think we need a break from COVID, and you dunking on Tracy again would be therapeutic. Liz Cheneyland, are you day drinking, Sam? What is your preferred beverage? I'm not day drinking, but I have drank through a lot of bourbon. I think I'm going to move to tequila because I think I've almost finished the bourbon. Retcon, Sam, I feel like we wish we still had Mayor Pete, horrified by Biden's lack of everything. Cat loving Kami. Hey, Sam, mad love from Boston. Want to give a shout out to my homies in the DSA and comrades organizing mutual aid in Alston, Brighton. Leftist is bestest. Former stomping grounds. Jay Tingle, cool how Jill Filipovic and Simone Sanders have deleted all of their Kavanaugh tweets as they gear up to take on the Biden rape story. Tom and Giselle are moving to the Gulf Coast. Classy way to run out the clock. Jay Tingle, I'm quarantined with my wife, Michelle, and she's been remarkably agreeable. It's been challenging for me to keep up, I imagine. I can't think of anything more challenging than to be quarantined with Jay Tingle. All right, and the final IM of the day, A square, Sam, it's just criminal that this madman is doing this, but the Dems have failed so miserably at explaining to the country the mix of malevolence and incompetence. I'm afraid of the Kowalski scenario, exhaustion and fright we are all feeling is staggering. Some suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Indeed, hang in there, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.